10,000 men, one mountain pass, one god-emperor who swears none shall pass. This should be annihilation, the final chapter of a broken rebellion ground to dust beneath imperial boots. But by sunrise, you'll understand how 10,000 become the earthquake that reshapes an empire. This isn't about numbers or battles. It's about resolve. How does one outlaw commander force the pride of an empire to bleed in the dirt? The answer begins in a dying forest, where Marcus Valerius stands beneath skeletal branches, his blistered hands wrapped in wolf pelts, firelight revealing the hollows of his battle-worn face as he murmurs to the gathering shadows, "We have one shot. We make them choke on their arrogance. The cold bites deeper than any blade, but Marcus has learned to stop shivering, his cracked lips numb as he speaks, breath misting as he addresses the frost-bitten faces around him. These are not soldiers, not in the imperial sense. Farmers, deserters, debt slaves, a handful of old legionnaires gone rogue. Tools become weapons in desperate hands. The forest groans behind them, branches heavy with snow, each wind gust carrying whispers of fate. Hold fast to your cause, not your comfort, Marcus says, scanning the ridge above the pass. They know the Imperials will come at dawn. Not scouts, not a probing force, but the Iron Fifth Legion, bannered under General Quintus Luceran, the man who wrote the siege doctrines the Empire lives by. Miles away, Luceran stands before a map sprawled across a war table carved from pine, his fingers tracing the mountain pass as he murmurs, "We crush them before noon, or we tarnish the veil of imperial dominance forever." The pass itself is a coffin carved from stone, narrow enough that only 20 men abreast can march cleanly, and that's if snow doesn't choke it further. Marcus knows this. He chose it for exactly that reason. He walks its length in the dark, boots crunching over frost, one hand trailing the icy rock wall. His lungs ache with thin air. His ribs swell against the tight leather beneath his cloak. 3 days ago, they dragged logs across the high ridges, packed snow over them, set primitive traps rigged with rusted chains and pitch. Nothing noble, just desperate calculus. They believe there is no honor outside formation, Marcus tells Helena, his second, a former cavalry captain turned renegade. So we give them madness, chaos, real war. Miles away, Luceran sits surrounded by braziers and oiled maps. He does not underestimate Marcus. He remembers his face from campaigns past, the man's refusal to break ranks even when surrounded. He was born to die for lost causes, Luceran tells his cohort, but this time he dies for mine. The Iron Fifth breaks camp in silence, armor gleaming in the half-light, each soldier drilled to kill before dawn and dine by noon. They carry no tents, no fresh supplies, just iron certainty. Back in the pass, Marcus presses one trembling hand to a frozen boulder and whispers, "Let their arrogance march blind into the mountain's mouth." And the wind carries his words into the dark like a dare. Dawn snaps like a blade. The first trumpet call from the imperial lines echoes down the valley, followed by the low thunder of synchronized boots crushing powdery snow. Marcus sits perched on an outcrop above the pass, eyes narrowed against the rising light. His fingers are raw and bleeding where the pelts have split, but he doesn't flinch. Helena crouches beside him, spyglass in hand. 6 cohorts, all in line. They'll push through by weight if we let them. Marcus gestures to the narrowest point in the pass, where jagged rocks lean in like teeth. "We won't let them. We break one rank, they clog their own throat." Below them, the rebels brace along makeshift barricades of timbers and shield fragments, faces smeared with soot to kill the glare of snow. An older deserter adjusts a tattered helmet, voice crackling with resignation. "We'll be bones by midday." Another, younger, shakes with both fear and cold. Helena hears and snaps, "Then die where you stand, but don't waver." Miles away, Lucerin adjusts his gauntlets, metal scraping against calloused palms as he speaks to his officers in clipped tones. Once we're in the pass, we hammer through. No pauses, no gaps. If Marcus tries tricks, we burn through them. This is a purge, not a battle. His second in command, Severus, a hawk-eyed veteran with a face mapped by old scars, adds, "His men fight like wolves." Lucerin nods. Then we cage them, drive spears in from the cliffs if need be. Victory must not just be won, it must be taught. And with that, the Iron Fifth begins its march into the mountain's waiting jaws. The pass tightens around them like a vice. Snow muffles the clank of armor, but not the tension. Marcus watches from a ledge above as the first Imperial cohort enters the crushing choke point. Banners snapping, shields presented, eyes forward like statues cast in iron. At his signal, a flint strikes, then another. A line of sparks leaps to the tar-soaked rope that disappears over the edge. The mountain cracks open. Logs tumble from above, sharpened stakes howling through the air, smashed timbers collapsing into the narrow ranks. Screams rise. Confusion follows. Officers bark commands unheard under the avalanche of chaos. A second roar erupts as the rebels rain down fire-soaked pitch, igniting the suffocating mass. Trapped, the Imperials scramble to form ranks, only to find themselves slashing at shadows. Marcus wastes no time. Now, before they reorganize, Helena blows her signal horn, and his ragged army charges not from the front, but from the cliffs and hidden ravines, wielding spears made from farming tools, swinging short swords left to rust in old barracks. Blood hits snow. It steams. Lucerin, still beyond the ridge, sees the smoke rise too early. "Impossible," he whispers, fingers digging into his palm. Severus leans in. "A trap. He's bleeding our front ranks before we can deploy." Lucerin closes his eyes for half a second. "Then we give him more to bleed." He signals two cohorts to flank the cliffs. Back in the pass, Marcus feels his lungs burning, the sting of ash and smoke curling behind his teeth as he slams the base of his spear against a fallen centurion's shield. "Hold the line! Gut their rhythm!" Around him, the rebels obey, but they are few, and the weight of Imperial discipline begins to rally even under fire. Their line surges again, bloodied but unyielding. Marcus knows what must come next. He must become more than commander now. He must become the wedge that keeps the mountain from swallowing his people whole. The question returns, pressing cold against his spine like steel. How does one outlaw commander force the pride of an empire to bleed in the dirt? Lucerin's cohorts spill up the cliffs like liquid steel, but the terrain fights them harder than any blade. Scree crumbles beneath their boots, tree roots twist ankles, and the cold bites without mercy. Rebels strike and vanish, wraiths armed with farming axes and guttering torches. Severus leads the ascent, cursing as his men slip on ice and frozen earth. "Cowards hide in rocks," he snarls, driving his sword through a rebel whose death scream echoes in a forgotten mountain dialect. On the pass floor, the Iron Fifth regroups through billowing smoke. They ram shield walls through makeshift barricades, dragging their own dead aside, advancing over smoldering bodies. A young legionnaire, face streaked with soot, locks eyes with a gray-bearded rebel before thrusting his spear through the man's chest, whispering, "No glory in this, just survival." Marcus watches from his perch, seeing Imperial discipline grinding forward despite the chaos. His knuckles crack white against his sword hilt, body trembling from exhaustion, crashing against raw determination. "We've bled their vanguard," he tells Helena, "but if they widen their formation, we're finished." She squints through the haze, face tightening. They're spreading now. The mountain answers with vengeance. A muffled boom reverberates through stone. Then the ledge behind the legions ruptures upward. Marcus's final gambit unfolds. Stolen Imperial powder kegs, buried beneath frozen earth for precisely this moment. Rock and ice cascade down, crushing armor and flesh alike. The pass turns slick with blood. Luceran's formations splinter. Centurions bellow commands that drown in the avalanche's roar. Luceran watches his perfect order dissolve, jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. So he sacrifices the mountain itself, not a soldier's choice, but a rebel's total war, he mutters. His aide, face gray with ash, asks quietly, "Is it working?" Luceran turns slowly, eyes cold as the peaks above. If we're asking that question, we've already surrendered the advantage. Yet still his legion grinds forward, no longer a pristine weapon, but a wounded beast refusing to fall. Marcus spits blood onto pristine snow, lungs scorched from smoke, fingers numb from cold. Still standing, still deciding, and the question burns brighter than any signal fire. What happens when an empire bleeds more from wounded pride than from any mortal wound? Helena yells over the wind, voice hoarse, "They're rallying again. One more wave and they'll crush us flat." Marcus forces himself upright, vision swimming, the copper taste of blood pooling behind his teeth. His breath rasps like torn parchment as he answers, "We baited them this far. Time to close the teeth." Wordless, he limps toward the ridge's edge, dragging a signal flag soaked in resin. He strikes flint against steel, flame coughing to life in defiance of the mountain cold. Across the peaks, hidden in goat trails and avalanche gullies, rebel lookouts spot the blaze. One by one, they ignite their own beacons. Then the mountain moans, not from battle, but from the weight they've prepared. Ice wedges burst, rock plates grown loose, entire swathes of the slope collapse in orchestrated devastation. Not aimed at the Imperials directly, but behind them, snapping their escape route like a spine. The Iron Fifth sinks to their knees in the mountain's betrayal. Luceran, nearly thrown from his horse by the quake, shouts over the din, "Reverse formation, secure the rear." But his command staff's eyes speak what words cannot. They are already too deep. Severus roars, "He sealed us in. This isn't war, it's a burial." And in that moment, surrounded by cliffs, fire, and the impossibility of retreat, Luceran finally understands. He isn't facing a revolt, he is drowning in conviction. From above, Marcus watches the shudder pass through the legion. He grips his blade tighter, blood and smoke mixing on the steel. His cracked lips curl into a grim line as one final echo of his vow escapes. Let them choke. And as snow returns in gentle flurries that fall on flame and ruin alike, a lone rebel drops to his knees, not from a wound, but from awe, whispering, "They bleed. The Empire actually bleeds." Even now, with their backs to crumbling cliffs and wounded pride staining the snow, the Iron Fifth refuses to break. Luceran rebuilds order through sheer force of will, riding through the ranks on a limping charger, calling officers by name, demanding cohesion from chaos. "Steel does not bend," he snarls, blood flecking his armor. "We are steel." For a fleeting moment, his command tightens. They rally around collapsed supply trains, hoist fallen brothers onto makeshift sleds, reforming in the desperate geometry of survival. But the mountain still looms, patient and merciless. Marcus watches them regroup and feels the weight of the final choice crushing his chest. They will keep coming unless he breaks something deeper than bone and flesh. He descends into the past now, not as a shadow commander, but as flesh and presence, walking through smoking drifts, face blackened with soot, eyes burning with resolute thunder. A rebel whispers, he walks between gods and ghosts now, and passes him a torch with trembling hands. Helena falls in step beside him, her face ghostly from frost and exhaustion. Marcus speaks only once, his voice raw, frayed, but absolute. We end it here. He approaches the final powder charge, buried beneath the central ridge, the one cache they had reserved only for retreat, and lights it. The explosion is not massive, but precise, calculated. It topples the last overhang and severs the path behind the remaining Imperial force. Trapped. No way forward, no way back to Rome. Lucerin hears the muffled boom and lowers his head in understanding. "He fights not to win," he murmurs to Severus, "but to be remembered." Behind him, silence spreads through the ranks like poison. No orders come, no movement follows, just the soft hush of snow falling on bloodied armor. Marcus feels no triumph, only the final numbness of a cause carried through rivers of blood to its inevitable conclusion. As twilight claims the valley, the pass holds its breath, and in that breath, history kneels. The Empire survives this war, eventually retaking the pass by the following winter. But the Iron Fifth never truly marches again. The name Marcus Valerius becomes forbidden in imperial academies, yet carved into rebel doorposts and whispered across village squares like an incantation of hope. 10,000 men, one mountain pass, and a silence that never leaves the stone. Shepherds claim that if you press your ear to the mountain just after fresh snowfall, you can still hear the words he spoke, carried eternally on frozen wind. Let them bleed where they showed none. Years pass, but the stone remembers. Scars of flame still mark the ridges. Half-buried gear rusts beneath sliding snow, and no birds nest in the high ledges where rebels once died singing. Children born decades after the clash are told to fear the pass, not for ghosts, but for consequence. The Empire stands, but thinner, warier, forced to reckon with defiance carved into the bones of its geography. A statue of Lucerin is erected in the capital, horse-rearing, eyes idealized in marble glory, sword forever raised against invisible foes. But in the provinces, crude etchings of Marcus Valerius survive, scratched beneath barn doors and tavern tables, hidden in fishermen's knots and shepherds' markers, faceless but unmistakable, a man with cracked lips, burning eyes, and a torch held like judgment. Imperial scouts report these markings appearing overnight in villages where tax collectors vanish. There's no tomb to mark Marcus's end, only snow and silence where the mountain claimed him. Yet every year, as winter winds howl through that narrow spine of rock, they carry not victory, not despair, but a whisper shaped like rebellion. It sings to shepherds and soldiers alike, to debt slaves and discarded veterans. It asks the question again and again, not for answer, but for memory. How does one outlaw commander force the pride of an empire to bleed in the dirt? The wind knows. And sometimes, in the very dead of winter, it replies in a voice broken by time, but sharp as iron. With fire, with ice, with belief. And in one final cruelty of truth, neither empire nor rebel ever owns the mountain again. War finds easier roads. Trade bypasses its treachery. Even maps grow vague where the pass once roared red with blood. What endures isn't territory or lines inked in capitals, but the silence, the weightless hush of hollowed stone. A silence earned by 10,000 men who held a corridor not for conquest or glory, but to force the world to listen. Listen to pain, to refusal, to the sound of control cracking. The Empire buries its embarrassment, building new legions over old scars. But Marcus remains, not in statues or scrolls, but in the biting wind that scrapes unspoken promises across frozen ridges. In the sharp chill before a storm when the air tastes like reckoning. And most haunting of all, in a single charred standard buried in frost, left half standing in a battlefield swallowed by time, its banner long rotted, its pole fused to stone. Not by force, but by fire, as if the mountain itself claimed allegiance to no crown, only to the memory of a man who stood and said, "Here, pride ends. Here, the empire bleeds." And so the wind carries that final oath longer than any command, farther than any sword stroke. Shepherds hear it in the early quiet before dawn, when the frost settles against their huts and the stars burn low. Scholars debate the battle, emperors deny it, generals refuse to name the loss. But those who walk the silent path where the Iron Fifth broke and bled feel something deeper than buried truth. They feel the mountain, watching, waiting, not for vengeance or glory, but for the next heart, bold enough to stand alone and say, enough. Years fade, wars change, but somewhere beneath the snow, beside the half-buried standard fused to stone, there is a groove worn smooth by bare fingers. Not many find it, fewer still understand its shape. It is not a name, not a symbol, just the impression of a hand pressed once against frozen rock. Cracked lips, burning lungs, numb fingers, a single man against the weight of empire. And the wind still whispers his question, the one that never needed an answer, only the echo. And if you stand long enough in that frozen hollow where names were carved out of silence, not stone, you might sense it. Not a ghost nor vision, but the memory etched into the air itself. A figure limping through snow with a torch raised against darkness, flanked by smoke and the unwavering shiver of conviction. No insignia, no crown, no legion at his back, just the raw silhouette of defiance weathered by winter's bite. In that moment, the mountain does not roar, it listens, holding its breath like a sentinel frozen in time. And from that emptiness comes a reply, not a command, not a prayer, but the scrape of wind through hollow stone, carrying the final lesson of imperial pride. The cost was never measured in gold or land or power, but in the single handprint seared into ice, untouched since it melted once around flesh and flame, a testament more enduring than any emperor's decree. The empire builds monuments to forget, but the wind remembers everything. So if you ever find yourself near that forgotten stretch of stone when winter deepens and the stars draw close, pause, hold your breath. Listen not for voices, but for the silence that follows them, the silence that outlasts legions. Not all legacies wear crowns or wield titles. Some merely light a torch in defiance, knowing it may be the last warmth they feel. Somewhere near that half-frozen handprint, a breeze curls down from the peaks and presses against your skin like memory. Not warm, not cold, just presence. And if the wind moves a settler's hood or tugs at a soldier's cloak, it's not to chill, but to remind. The question still hangs in the gorge like a phantom drumbeat that skipped its last stroke. How does one outlaw commander force the pride of an empire to bleed in the dirt? If you listen closely, not with your ears, but with the marrow of your spine, you may hear the wind reply as it winds through that ancient pass. The answer comes like rust cracking off old chains, like footsteps that have never stopped echoing. It says, not softly, but with weight, by standing where no one else will, until the mountain remembers his name. And that is all the mountain ever grants, remembrance, not comfort. No empire patrols that pass now, no tribute crosses it. The snow buries every footprint by morning, but still the wind carves faint lines that speak louder than any victory hymn. Travelers claim to glimpse something in the frost-glazed stones, not a man, not a ghost, but a void shaped like defiance. No crown fills it, no name outlasts it, just the weight of 10,000 wills sharpened into one moment. One stand, when Marcus Valerius chose fire over flight, silence over surrender. The mountain neither mourns nor celebrates, it preserves. In icicles formed where torches once roared, in stone that bears no plaque yet vibrates with memory. You may pass without knowing, or you may stop, lungs burning with thin air, and recognize exactly what lies beneath your feet. Not a battlefield, not a grave, but a question carved into eternal frost that even time cannot erase. And still the wind asks, again and again, until someone someday finds the courage to answer once more. Not with swords, nor armies, nor proclamations does legacy endure, but with silence that roars when the world forgets to listen. The mountain holds no empire, draws no line, bears no name in stone. Instead, it offers one final truth, whispered only when the frost is sharpest, when breath ghosts against night air like spirits too stubborn to fade. That defiance, once truly born, never dies. Marcus Valerius vanishes into myth not through death, but because the mountain claims him as its own. In every cracked ridge and curling wind, he lingers as more than man, as a question sharper than blades, colder than dominion, older than even empire itself. And long after the last legion has forgotten its formation, after the last imperial banner has frayed to worthless thread, the pass will whisper just one thing to those who dare approach its frozen jaws. He stood, and in the face of impossible odds, that singular act of defiance was enough. And then, it ends as quietly as it began. No final charge, no formal surrender. Just snow thickening over stone and silence smoothing the scars. The mountain, unmarked yet unyielding, stands unchanged to the eye, but forever altered where memory nestles in frost and hush. Somewhere beneath the ice, torches once roared and rebels once held firm, while the empire cracked, not at its edges, but from within. That moment, hushed but unforgotten, lays dormant like fire beneath snow. So if you pass through that forgotten place and feel the ache of something unseen curl around your ribs, it is nothing supernatural. It is only history, breathing. And in that breath, if you listen close and true, you'll hear not the triumph of a king nor the lament of a fallen enemy, only the soft, unbroken vow of a man who once stared down empire with cracked lips, numb fingers, and burning eyes, and whispered, "Here, you answer to us." And so the story folds into the mountain, its jagged cliffs no longer echoing with war cries, only with wind that hides questions no empire dares confront. The empire forges new legends, shrinks Marcus to footnotes, or dismisses him as myth. Yet frost returns to the pass each year as if marking the anniversary. No road is rebuilt there, no monument commissioned, but travelers stop, feeling the silence thick with unsettled accounts. Snow continues to fall, gently, relentlessly, veiling ruins beneath centuries of drift. And beneath it all, that handprint remains, smoothed by ice but refusing to vanish, reminding all who find it that one man stood, torch raised, and became the fracture in empire's foundation. Not for glory, not for vengeance, but so the wind might carry his defiance farther than any legion could march. In that frozen corridor, between shadow and memory, the mountain keeps its vigil, and the silence speaks louder than imperial trumpets ever could.